China has clashed with Japan at the Senkaku Islands, where both nations claim sovereignty. China has also seized the Philippines' Scarborough Shoal, erected various artificial features at the Spratly Islands, and illegally occupied Vietnam's Paracel Islands in 1974. All of these acts are part of an expansionist agenda that China has schemed for a long time. In 1956, China used force to illegally occupy the eastern part of Vietnam's Paracel Islands. On January the 19th, 1974, China completely seized the Paracel Islands by force, sinking one warship and damaging 3 others. 74 Vietnamese soldiers lost their lives. Meanwhile, Vietnam releases footages of interviews of witnesses in the Paracels in order to assert its sovereignty. Phạm So was born in 1934 in Da Nang, Vietnam. In 1956, he was charged by the Vietnamese government to repair water reservoirs in the Paracel Islands for the Department of Meteorology.
Cho nên hồ Quân Đội ở Đà Nẵng, bây giờ ở đường Nguyễn Chí Thanh á, với thuê tôi ra sửa cái hồ của Tây Lý Tượng, bởi vì cái hồ nó hư, hồ nước nó hư. Tôi đi xuống tàu Hải quân 402 của quân đội Việt Nam Cộng Hòa trở đi. Thì đi hồi nó lúc là 4 giờ chiều. 4 giờ chiều hôm nay đi miết đêm cho đến là sáng 6 giờ sáng hôm sau là đến đảo.
Nguyen Van Cook conducted land surveys in the Paracel Islands on behalf of the Vietnamese government from 1972.
Tháng 1 của năm 72, được ra khảo sát, đi với chiếc tàu hải quân ra khảo sát. Đợt đầu tiên ra khảo sát ở đảo Hoang Sa, ra đó để mà khảo sát những cái bể nước nằm quanh cái nhà của Pháp xây dựng. Thì cái nào hư, tức là sau về báo cáo. Sau cuối 73, 74 đó, tức là lại được đi thêm một chuyến nữa. Tức là lúc đó là coi như là đi khảo sát, tức là đi lấy mẫu đất ở trên đảo Hoàng Sa. Thì sau khi coi như làm 1 ngày rưỡi, tức là coi như chiều ngày đó là ra lại tài HPI để mà về lại tàu Lý Thường Kiệt ấy. Thì bắt đầu ra tàu sau, đoàn ra tàu lại, thì bắt đầu là thấy tàu của Trung Quốc nó ở trong gần đảo Cam Tuyền đó. Thế thì cái tàu hải quân của HPI 16
The Vietnamese government has also released the Hoang Sa Department of Meteorology dossier in 1955 as proof that the country has proclaimed and actualized its sovereignty in the Paracels before China forcibly annexed the islands. Seizing the Paracels was just the beginning. Immediately after, China turned the islands into a base for further aggressive actions. In 2009, China officially submitted to the United Nations a map that includes the 9-dash line, which covers over 80% of the South China Sea. If this demand by China becomes reality, ASEAN countries stand almost certainly to lose. The South China Sea not only contains the most important trade routes in the world and huge oil and gas reserves, it is the living space of nations surrounding the area. Brunei would descend into chaos as it loses control of the exclusive economic zone, continental shelf, and most of its oil reserves, which add up to 90% of this country's GDP. When the freedom of navigation in the sea is imperiled, the volume of goods transiting through the Malacca Strait will dwindle, hitting Singapore's seaport industry hard. Malaysia will live with a 9-dash line that stretches almost all the way to its coastline. This means the country will forever lose what has always belonged to them: oil, gas, and fishery interest. In addition, the loss of freedom of navigation will harm Malaysia's exports and imports. The resources-rich Natuna Seas, which belong to Indonesia, is no exception. The 9-dash line going through it will rob Indonesia of its fisheries and offshore gas resources. The 9-dash line will take away most of the Philippines' western seas, leaving the country with only territorial and internal waters. In 2012, the Philippines lost control of the Scarborough Shoal to China. Using a stratagem called luring the tiger out of the mountain, China enticed the Philippines to believe China's promises and abandon its bases in the shoal, leading to Beijing's capture of it without much effort. Also in 2012, China clashed with Japan at the Senkaku Diaoyu Islands. As a gateway to China's entry to the Pacific Ocean, the area becomes a place of tension between the two sides. These actions of China not only violate the sovereignty of ASEAN countries and their economic interest, but also imperil the freedom of trade and navigation. As a case in point, China has attempted to chase out American aircraft around the Spratly Islands. Beijing has also stated that it has the right to restrict foreign planes and ships to navigate the areas where it is illegally building artificial islands in the Spratlys. At first, it may seem that China's actions are only aimed at Vietnam and its interests. However, what happened to Vietnam in the Paracel Islands has also happened to the Philippines at the Scarborough Shoal, and your country may as well be the next target. If we continue to sit idly by, China will soon dominate the South China Sea with their illegal, so-called 9-dash line.